disabled creators tell incredible progressive stories. They don't need a blue flashing light above their head to say, I'm disabled, because if it's relevant to the content, it will naturally come out in their work, because they must think that I was in Chernobyl or something, like some nuclear reactor, and by that, maybe that isn't even Chernobyl, so that's a bad example, but literally put in a microwave or something and turned into who I am. I also knew that it would be unreasonable for me to expect someone that would date me to not really know everything about me, be a completely open book, because I know they've got to get used to so much stuff.
What's going on, people? Welcome to this week's episode of Jordan Jarrett-Bryan's The Coolest Disabled in the Entire World. You know that is fact. I haven't got to back it up, but for the purposes of me being humble, on this podcast, I invite amazing people who are doing amazing things on to try and prove me wrong. Very, very simple. Are they more cool than me? The answer is no, but we have a lot of fun trying to pretend like they are. If you haven't subscribed and shared and commented already, what are you waiting for? Show us some love and please get on with that. Because this week, I've got someone, and I say this every single week, but this week, I've got someone who genuinely can challenge the throne of the world's coolest disabled. I've got a friend of mine on the podcast here today that is one of the coolest people that I know. He's amazing. He's a media mogul and just an amazing bloke. I've got this week on the podcast Mr. Dom Hyams. Dom, my bro, talk to me. What are you saying?
That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me, mate.
It is, isn't it?
So much.
It is. Yeah. And it was all true.
I'll come here more often.
You should. It's a good place to be.
My head's already big, so making it big already.
You see, Dom, this is where the cool people hang out. This is where, I'm the coolest person, but I invite other people who are also cool. You got to come here more often, man.
It only took me 36 years to find the coolest place.
36 years, baby. Come on, man.
Thank you.
Are you well, Dom?
Very well. Yeah, I shouldn't maybe date today, but it's a Monday. I was telling you earlier. It's a sludgy Monday, but you've given me a zest for life with this pod. So, yeah, we're rocking and rolling. We're back with full beams energy, ready for this pod. I'm very much looking forward to it.
I love that, man. That's why we're here with your spontaneous trim.
Yeah, yesterday. There we go.
Looking sharp as ever, bro. Before we get into you, Dom, and have this fantastic chat, I ask all my guests on this podcast for their coolness number out of 10. So tell me, Dom, out of 10, where would you rank yourself in terms of, your coolness? Talk to me.
That's actually a very difficult question, and I've never ever been asked it before. And I should have guessed that it might be part of the game. I'll go like a 6, because I'd like to think more, but there's some inherently uncool things about me that I'm sure we'll get into later down the line.
We are definitely going to get into it, and for what it's worth, you're not a 6. We'll come back to this at the end of the pod, and we'll, by the end of this, revisit that and see where exactly on that scale you are. But another spoiler alert, it's definitely not a 6. Dom, man, I've known you for a while now. I first met you during, the lead up to the London 2012 Paralympic Games.
Amen.
That was a very, very good period, man. What do you, because that was a really good period, because Channel 4 did this big drive to try and get, it was their first Paralympic Games, and they wanted to make sure that a core part of their coverage, both on and off screen, were that disabled people and disabled talent was a big feature of that particular games coverage. What do you remember of that particular period? What was your role at Sunset and Vine? And do you remember when we first met? Because that was a great day.
I'm going to be honest. I can't.
Not gonna lie, but I know it was a good day. I know it was a good day, Tom. It was a good day.
And you're a fixture of my life now, so
baby,
what a day that was! What a day that was! But going back and also thinking about that time, like it genuinely was a great time, and props to Channel 4 because at that time there was just nothing like what we saw in that 2012 coverage, and no conversations had on such a like big scale around disability as what they were planning and proposing to do. So I came at it from getting onto the Channel 4 production trainee scheme in 2009 or 2009 into 10. And I knew that in 2012, Sunset and Vine were going to be the production company to produce the Paralympic Games for Channel 4. When you're on the production trainee scheme, you go to a specific company. So I applied specifically for that Sunset and Vine opening. I was like, that would be a really awesome thing to work on. And it just so happens that it was. But in that 2 years between 2010 and 2012, there was this incredible amount of work to, as you say, like bring talent from the corners of the UK and beyond, in fact, like to the games and to upskill them as presenters, reporters, and everything else in between, as well as sort of behind the screen talent. And it was amazing to see the wealth of talent, but also just the like confidence of them as a broadcaster to be like, we can do something incredibly new, innovative, powerful, and completely change a conversation around disability and, of course, the Paralympic Games more broadly. So it was just such an amazing time, and without kind of sort of, I suppose, giving any sort of spoilers of the games themselves, I remember so distinctly, that whole run-up was incredible, but the people in 2012, in the Olympic Village, like in the sort of broadcast center, it was just like such a cool energy about everyone. And then you were in, there every day for like a month or something, barely sleeping, just working, but absolutely just wanting it to be an unbelievable success. And you open the newspapers and see, disability representation, front and back covers. And, genuinely, like in my life, to that point, I'd never really kind of engaged with disability, in inverted commas, with any sort of real energy or passion. It was just part of me being brittle bone, like having brittle bones, and I was totally comfortable with it, but I didn't kind of, I suppose, want to identify because I didn't feel a need to. But in that moment, you're like, wow, this is cool, and this is something I want to do more of into the future.
What was you doing before Sunset and Vine, before that scheme, had come out? What was your background prior to 2012?
Yeah, so I just come out of I went to Warwick Uni, 2006, 2009. I studied management, but with a kind of like marketing leaning, in the sense of I knew I wanted to do something in media marketing in some shape or form. But I took that degree because a teacher that I really respected at the time, shout out Mr. DeCourt, we were debating where I go and what I do and what options are available. And he said, being very honest, I think that you're going to have to prove more than someone else that has all the same qualifications, but is just not disabled. Like, you probably need to show the people that are in the jobs in the universities that you are as good as, if not better, at every turn in your life. So you having a Warwick degree, that to some people will count for something, and then you can specialize later on, rather than going through exactly what you want as a vocational thing, but then not having the academic sort of background that you can lean on, and if someone wants to kind of find a reason not to hire you, which, obviously that shouldn't be the way the world is, but I think it was a pretty good bit of advice in that moment. I felt confident in like what I studied and what that and the doors that opened, and if that makes sense. But then I also knew I wanted to go into media or marketing. I'd done a Channel 4 documentary back in 2006 of me and my mates going around Europe called Crip on a Trip, which is still, I think, on like 4OD or all four now it's called, isn't it? And which is very, very embarrassing now because that's like 20 years ago. But yeah, so I'd like seen both in front of and behind the camera because it was just me and my mates doing an hour-long documentary for Channel 4. And it was a lot of fun, and you saw the effect of what TV and broadcast could do for people, and that again was like something that I knew I wanted to do more of in some shape or form.
I love that. So there's three things I want to mention. First of all, I watched back the show reel that I submitted. So quick story. The scheme that Channel 4 put out to try and find new talent in 2009, I didn't know about it because I was playing basketball in Italy. So I had no idea. Yeah. I came back that summer during the off season, fully intending to go back to Italy for my 5th season out there would have been. I met up with a friend of mine. He said, look, I've had a meeting with someone at Channel 4 about something unrelated, but the guys just told me they've just closed their the nomination applications for presenting talent. But I know a guy that plays plays a Paralympic sport. He's got experience in journalism and he's from London. I think you should consider him. So the guy was like, deadline's kind of gone, but if he can get me a show reel like now, I'll consider it. My friend phoned me and said, look, you got to do a show reel now. Big up Charlie. I phoned mate Charlie. So Charlie, we got to go to a park and film something now. I got to get it in. Sent it in. And the rest is history. And you saw where I joined. They put me into the scheme. But I watched the show reel back. Shocking. It's absolutely shocking. It's one of the most embarrassing bits of filming I've ever seen. It was embarrassing, but it got me through. The other thing is that you mentioned there was you said that your teacher said to you, just get on because you'll need more because you're disabled, right? And I think that's something that a lot of Black people can relate to, because a lot of Black people are often told, because you're Black, you're going to have to be 4 times as good to kind of get ahead. So it's really interesting. Someone with a disability that was told the same thing basically as well. That's super dope. And then the third thing I wanted to ask you was, that I remember seeing you around the office, kind of whizzing around in your electric chair. I don't think we'd spoken at this point, but I'd seen you around working hard. And did you ever feel, and be honest, did you ever feel that the whole scheme, the whole pitch, the whole drive to have disabled people included as part of that coverage was at any point tokenistic? Or did you always feel respected, acknowledged, and valued?
Very honestly, like I did feel valued throughout that process. I think that the way that Channel 4 approached it was much more just progressive than even some conversations that you have now. Like in my world of sort of marketing day in, day out now, I will still deal with people that very quickly it becomes apparent that they are engaging with you because just it gives them that warm, fuzzy feeling inside, and they want to do it because it just feels good for them, not for any like tangible reason of sort of greater benefit to society or to their company or whatever it might be. So I think that it always felt like there was a genuine positive purpose behind what was going on. And of course, like, Channel 4 is a commercial entity. It understood that they were land grabbing this amazing opportunity to like own the coverage of Paralympic sport. So I think that was never lost, and that was never kind of, not talked about in some ways, because it was a bold move, but a great move to try and kind of do that, because, the BBC had locked up Olympic coverage. And so, what can you do if you're Channel 4 and you want to move into sport? And I think that was, that was also just sort of part of the subtext of the conversation. But I think also something that I remember at the time is, because as soon as I got out of uni, there was a few months where I went straight into the like WPP grad scheme. And this was just at the like financial crash time. So I got onto that scheme and then essentially was bouncing between the different agencies, like, because you learn your trade at different agencies. And then one of the agencies that I was waiting to go on to, they just had an employment freeze. And so they just like, I think they were basically getting rid of loads of people. So I couldn't move into their company because probably, they were getting rid of people rather than worrying about interns coming or, graduates coming. And you know what you're like when you're just out of uni, you're like, oh, I've got itchy feet now. And this was only a few months after uni. So instead of kind of waiting it out, I was like, I'm going to just see what else is around because I'm bored of waiting for this and maybe the advertising industry's gone down the pan or whatever. But in those few months, there was a mentality and a like ethos in advertising of dog eat dog. Like, you've got to be seen to be in the office later than your boss. You've got to be seen to, like, do more hours than your boss, even if you've done your work. It was so hierarchical. It was so just like graft, graft, graft. People weren't being like paid adequately, and there was so much privilege everywhere that I think that I was acutely aware that for so many disabled people, those kind of opportunities just aren't there. Like, there's no one disabled in this, advertising world that I'd seen. So actually, to see the world of media, which is obviously a very close sister of marketing, like, do something that celebrated and encouraged disability, from grassroots up, I think is only something we needed, to see more of. And still to this day, like, I will absolutely advocate for the fact that there is still so many intrinsic barriers to these industries that you have to support, minority groups to actually push through and create opportunities for them.
No, I hear that, man. And just I remember something else you said earlier on, which I found interesting. You referenced the program you did for Channel 4 back in the day called, what was it called? Crip and what? Sorry?
Crip on a Trip.
Crip on a Trip, right? And I find it really interesting, man. I want to ask about this because, so I've got this thing, and that's not just me. Many people, many black people are very uncomfortable with the N word, right? And there's a lot of black people that try to do this whole reclaiming the N word. I think it's nonsense. I think it's dangerous, and I just don't buy it. I don't like people when they call it, say it to me, even in a kind of jovial or a kind of like a greeting style where I just don't refer that word to me. I just don't buy this whole we can say it but they can't say it nonsense. But I don't feel the same way about terms when it comes to other kind of minoritized groups, for example. So the whole kind of phrase cripple for some disabled people is massively offensive. What's your view on language and how disabled people differ on what's acceptable and what's not?
I think that I've got two answers for you. I've got 18-year-old Dom's answer, and I've got mine now in a professional capacity, like creating media marketing campaigns on behalf of the disabled community. And I think me as an 18-year-old, I was so happy and content to call it Crip on a Trip because, so when I went to Newquay as a 16-year-old, which was a rite of passage for my school, go and stay in caravans on a sort of holiday park just outside Newquay and then go clubbing with your fake IDs every evening. That did work because I was in a wheelchair, so it's correct stuff. And I had a T-shirt, and everyone got T-shirts, and mine was Crip on a Trip. And so I don't even know who said it first, like where that came from, but mine was Crip on a Trip. And then fast forward 2 years later, we're making this documentary, and it just comes to me like, oh, we should call it Crip on a Trip. And at the time, that felt like a no-brainer. Like, the word cripple couldn't have been further from my experience as a disabled person. Like, the negative historical connotation of how disabled people were treated when called cripple was so far away from what I was experiencing traveling around Europe as one of the lads with my mates. And so it felt totally appropriate to call it that because we wanted that juxtaposition. We wanted to let people feel a little bit uncomfortable so they had this moment of learning when they watched the show. And we put a kind of caveat on the website that showed that it was me coming up with a name because, as you can imagine, a lot of people were like, oh my God, Channel 4, can't believe they've called it that. So we made sure that everyone knew that I'd actually self-titled it. But then now, to go into your sort of point now, like, as you get older, you learn, like, don't you? You become educated in all sorts of things. And I know now way more than I did when I was 18 that, yes, like, I can advocate for myself and language to me doesn't matter. You can call me any word under the sun. And depending on its intention is how I feel about language, like, so if your intention is good 99.9% of the time, I'm not going to take offense to that, and that would be anyone, not just friends or family. But obviously I can't make that assumption on other people's behalf. And so if I have a choice of whether to say something or not, and there is a possibility it might offend someone around me, would I change my language because of that? Absolutely. And I think that is probably just what you'd call good old-fashioned maturity, in the sense that, like, I want to not offend people in my older life, and I want people to be comfortable and content with the choices that I make, and I want to not set an example or an impression that everyone is comfortable with that, because I absolutely know they're not. So that's, I suppose, sort of me personally. And then professionally, we're helping brands to, like, uphold and create a progressive dialogue around disability. And so in that sense, I have to be, like, on the forefront of how I think and talk about disability on a professional capacity every day. And yes, personal Dom, not working, can say what he likes about himself and talk about disability in whatever way I want. But when I've got my game face on, of course, I'm going to always be trying to, like, advocate for what I think the progressive disabled community would like me to say and how they'd like me to say it.
I hear it, man. What you think media is doing right in terms of progressing? Because we worked in linear TV, right, during those times.
Yeah.
And we're seeing in the last decade how digital has taken over, and the thinking of what people now want is now kind of a lot wider. Do you think the diversification of media is happening at a fast enough rate, and ideas from people who are disabled, who are different ethnicities, who are from different particular sexualities, who are from work? Like, do you think that is something that we're seeing enough of, or do you think traditional media has massively dropped the ball in terms of ensuring that it can stay alive and keep growing?
That is a big
It's a big question. It is. But you're a big guy, so I know you can handle it, Dom. You can handle it.
I think that we are still in a world where the people that make decisions and make the things are not as diverse as they should be. And we always, advocate, and I know you do all day, every day, that the more diverse the teams that are in the room helping make and shape things, the more naturally, authentically inclusive things that will be created. And I think there's still quite a long way to go, because I think the industries still inherently have an element of privilege to get where they are, like, to get where you want to be, and that hasn't necessarily, like, totally changed. So that's almost like from the baseline level of, if we had this sort of perfect world where we had full perfect diversity in all teams of making all content, then there would just naturally be better representation, progressive storytelling in what we see. And it just wouldn't be a conversation, it would just be what it is. And I think the fact that, obviously there's been a move to digital, and I've been in that world as things have moved more digital, and there's been plenty of things that are very good about that, in the sense of, we work in the world of creators, and social media has allowed creators to amplify their voices far and wide, without those barriers, without that necessarily like privilege in the way, and create cut through and create platforms and create incomes, and professionalize sort of disabled voices, but obviously diverse voices, underrepresented voices. And that's very cool. And then also we see technology in that mix also starting to move from niche accessibility to mainstream, whether you talk about, captions, whether you talk about audio description, whether you talk about, people in schools learning sign language, that naturally have sort of started somewhere and then they've seen it in media and then they've started to, be interested in it. And it's, we had a lot that people will say is negative about our media and social, but then also we have a lot of adoption of things that have happened because of social and because of media and the way that is evolving. And yes, it's evolving at pace. Yes, sometimes it feels very hard to like keep up with it all. But at the same time, I'm optimistic about the route that we're going down. And when I say that, I'm optimistic if we're looking introspectively at the UK. If you look at the world and you look at the US and you look at Mr. Trump and all of that, probably a pound in the jar because you knew I'd mention that. I mean, that's just chaos. I just feel like I'm living in a simulation because I just can't believe the things I'm reading. And, the whole kind of killing DEI, all of that stuff is just like these fragile male egos are just crazy. And just this war on wokeism is just, I mean, honestly, I don't even want to waste my breath on it because it's so like crazy to me. It's just all nonsense. And the fact that these big tech companies are essentially like cowering to this mania, but then also actually like following through and changing their own practices because they want to stay sweet. It's like this most open version of, I'll call it like close to corruption. Like you're seeing it in plain sight that they're just appeasing this character and they're then changing what they're doing to appease that character. And I find that absolutely bananas. Like the fact that they were all lined up at his inauguration, like part of the club, is just this most open kind of, I don't know what you even want to call it, like cartel almost. And it's just madness. But yeah, aside from that, which is chaos, what we are doing in our world and, things that we are seeing and more in the UK, but like just in the worlds that we operate in progressive media, like I feel optimistic.
Well, just to kind of pivot just for a second, you mentioned Trump and what's happening over there, but here in the UK, Dom, do you have concerns about the rise of the right in this country and how much of a loser disabled people in this country may become because of that? Do you fear what this country will look like for disabled people in the next decade if the trajectory? I know we've got a left-leaning party in government at the moment, but we're seeing what's happening on the other side. And do you have concerns about how that will affect you and our community?
For sure. And I think that we're already, without getting too political, we're already feeling the consequence of having a Tory government for many years before Labour came in. And I mean, don't get me started on Brexit, but like that probably hasn't helped. and then in terms of, just broader conversations about social change, welfare, the disabled community, having to, obviously all need to work to earn their sort of benefits. And, the narrative is just sort of it's not one of support of the communities at the moment. It's one of almost, like pointing blame or being slightly distrusting, I think is probably a good word. Like, like the community are there to simply want what they could or couldn't have. And actually, that's not one of, a caring society. A caring society tries to create like equity for all and, try and readdress that balance. And I think that we don't see that enough in the way that like disability is talked about on a sort of political level. And I think that there's still a long, long way to go in kind of readdressing that change and that turn, because I don't think we're there yet in the way that it's being talked about at all.
I hear you. All right, let's pivot now to something a bit more fun, a bit more lighthearted. Let's talk about dating. Let's chat about dating, Dom, right? Because I know that you are very much taken and loved up. But I want to know, Dom, for someone in a chair, and in particular someone that's in an electric chair, because I think there are different connotations, right, to people who are in an electric chair versus those that can that manually push their own chair. And I've got... I don't want to do the whole, some of my best friends are black, but some of my best friends are in wheelchairs. And so I've been out with So, and I've seen firsthand the response and the reaction from members of the opposite sex to my friends and family in chairs. And I just find it interesting, but I want to just hear from someone who's in a chair. What for you was the dating experience, let's call it that words, like for you, and what are some of the kind of like fun/horror stories of dating that you can talk to me about?
I'm going to give you a semi-boring answer but it may be like psychologically it's interesting. Up until a certain age, like I genuinely didn't really think of like dating and the idea of me putting myself out there to be rejected was something that I didn't want, like, for the person that I would be asking. As in, I was so self-conscious of putting someone else in a position where they would feel uncomfortable that I think, like, again, reflecting back on it now, like, I think that I just shut that down, like, in the sense of I was like, my life's different. It's cool. What comes along will come along. That's fine. And because I was so comfortable in my own skin from such a young age, like I've been so blessed to like not feel, I've always had very, very positive outlook on life and feel very content in myself, being totally comfortable with who I am, my disability and everything about it. And with that became this like just absolute rock solid sort of comfort in, if I date, I date. If I don't, I don't. And of course, like, you chat up girls at uni, you have a few drinks, whatever, you have experiences through time. But I would never, like, I would say, sort of leverage that and proactively seek it. And I saw other people do that. And it was just something I never wanted to like do. I never wanted to make myself vulnerable, but I never wanted to make them feel like in any way awkward. But I know now that was my own kind of vulnerability. And any time that I've kind of dated since then, it was people that probably you'd call broached the friend zone. And, they were on the edge of a friend zone, and then it became a murky middle ground somewhere between. And that's just genuinely the reality, really. Like, I, of course, like, met people, gone for dinner, and it was dates. Yeah. But like, it wasn't, I never wanted to put the pressure on it of like, oh, well, we're going for a date on. So, that was just never something that I had.
And is that purely because you're in a chair, Tom?
I think so. Yeah, I'm pretty sure, because I was so confident in myself, like so comfortable with who I was. But the idea of, and still to this day, the idea of like me doing something that makes someone else feel uncomfortable is, because I am so comfortable in myself. I didn't want that. Like, I didn't want to make someone else feel awkward, but I suppose that moment is the most disabling moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
When, in the same regard, like when someone doesn't look you in the eyes and they look at the person next to you, and they might have all the best intention in the world, but you can't escape but know in that moment that, they have, they aren't comfortable with your disability because of the fact that they're not talking to you, they're talking to the person that's next to you. And, it's those kind of little moments that more striking than if someone uses the word crip or whatever else it might be.
Yeah.
It's that you know that your disability is having an effect on them. So I suppose that, like, in terms of sort of dating, like, that kind of is how I always, in my youth, sort of thought about it and approached it. But as I say, like, always, had various experiences and all great, and never felt like left out in that regard. But then, without embarrassing Sophie too much, like I said, you have sort of experiences where you're friends with someone, and I also knew that it would be unreasonable, and maybe other people would disagree with this, but I also knew that it would be unreasonable for me to expect someone that would, like, date me to not, like, really know everything about me, like, be a completely open book, because I know they've got to get used to, like, so much stuff. And by that I mean, trains aren't gonna get me on them, or, like, when I turn up at a station and they need to holler down the station platform and heckle for someone's assistance, or if they need to help navigate through a crowd, or if I need to go and pee in a bush, like, whatever it is, they're going to be, like, in, and that's you can't, like, again, maybe I'm wrong, but coming at that from purely this sort of slightly, like, cagey romantic dating vibe feels a lot more difficult than going at it from, like, right, we're mates, you've seen it all already, like, we're getting on like a house on fire, and oh yeah, we're not mates, this is more, and that's exactly what happened. So
I find that interesting, Dom, because am I right in saying that what you're saying is for somebody in a chair, it's harder for somebody else to just see them, find them as sexy and attractive and want to date you. You've almost got to kind of go through the friends route. They've got to get to know you. They've got to understand you, and then almost find you someone that, I can actually date you as well. Is that fair?
I would not like to say that is everyone's experience, and I don't want everyone to feel that, like, you can't have a normal dating life, because of course you can, there are people out there that would find anyone attractive of any shape, size, whatever. So, like, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that I know that I found that a more comfortable route, because, again, I wasn't making any presumptions. I wasn't making any sort of just assuming that people will be totally comfortable with all aspects of my life in that kind of dating realm. And again, I know that for someone that is, I would say that I'm extremely confident and comfortable, I know that's my insecurity. Like, that feeling that I would put on other people is real, and I've always kind of avoided it. Not saying that other people don't do that and they just crack on, they love dating, they do it, and I've seen it with my own eyes, and damn, people can be very successful. And, like, fair play, like, you approach it however you want the dating game. I want people to feel, like, confident and comfortable and empowered to be who they are. And, I was too, but I suppose I was just so mindful to create this, like, equal level playing field of, like, both people being comfortable with who I was, not it just being me or being them too. And I think
I love that.
I waited for that to be balanced before anything else kind of really happened.
What was your line?
Can I go for a piss? Probably will.
Can I go for a piss? Okay. And Dom, let's talk now about the Purple Goats agency, which you are a part of. Talk to me about what it's about and what the kind of objectives are. What are you hoping to achieve with this business?
Yeah, so Purple Goat was founded by my dear friend Martin Sibley, April 2020, like all good agencies, against the backdrop of the pandemic. But it was really formed to work with brands to create the most forward-thinking, progressive marketing campaigns in the world. We knew that representation in media around disability was really woeful. The statistic at the time that was out was that just 0.06% of ads feature disabled people. But when you correlate that to the fact that roughly 24% of the population are disabled, that's a huge disparity that we weren't seeing in our media, in our advertising. And so Martin went and did a lunch and learn at Goat, who were one of the biggest influencer agencies in the world, now are probably the biggest in the world. And there was this collective light bulb moment of, wait a minute, our influence is a really good way to support brands in an authentic way, to have great representation, tell progressive stories, and authentically connect, the disabled community with their products and services and how they engage them, interact them, and think of them as actual customers. And it just so happens that was a formula that is something that really has worked. And disabled creators tell incredible progressive stories. They don't need a blue flashing light above their head to say, I'm disabled, because if it's relevant to the content, it will naturally come out in their work. If it isn't, they're just another person that disability is just part of the intersectionality of what makes them who they are, and they can talk about it as much or as little as they want. And they also, that kind of content also performs really well. So yes, it might be the fact that we don't see that much representation that stops people doom scrolling, and they see the content, they're like, oh, I've not seen that before. But also I think that there's a lot of the time we know that authenticity piece is key. And if you've got a disabled creator talking about their relationship with a product and they're leaning into lived experience, you can't really argue with that. It doesn't look like an advert for advert's sake. If I talk about my iPhone and I talk about it as an accessibility aid and how it helps me do my job and all the things I can do on this that I can't do, more broadly, on different devices, that instantly you're like, oh yeah, that will make sense. And so it feels like a really natural ad. And so it's been a wild 4 years. We're working with some of the biggest brands in the world. And as well as sort of content creation and social campaigns, we do a lot of insights, so helping brands to truly understand the communities that they're trying to engage and talk to and talk on behalf of. So the more you do the insight with the community, the more progressive and forward thinking and creative your idea probably can be. And then also the consultancy bit. So as well as a big shiny fee campaign with great representation and progressive storytelling, you want to make sure that that company is also doing the bits behind the scenes to truly drive inclusion into their work. So whether that's an accessible website or inclusive imagery or a team trained in how to engage disabled people with confidence, it's all of those things, because we obviously as an agency don't want to come unstuck and the community say, wait a minute, that's a cool ad, but they're actually terrible at this. So we work through that 360 lens, because we only want to be putting our name to things that we know that the community are going to turn around and go, yeah, this is cool, this is good, this is a net positive thing for the world.
I love that, man. I love that. And I see from afar the work you're doing, and it's definitely necessary and needed work, and you do it very well. So big up yourselves on that. We'll make sure we put a link to all your socials and what's in our description. And just find out, so you do a podcast off the back of this. Is the podcast linked to Go Purple? Yeah. So just tell us a little bit about what you're trying to achieve with the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, the Purple Goat podcast is a product of us knowing over the years and realizing that having conversations around disability and having conversations around marketing are often two things that aren't put together. but also just naturally have like building people's confidence around topics, a little bit like what you're doing right here, where you don't have to sort of have this formulaic condensed package to digest something. Actually there is nuance, there is deeper conversations to have, and we can create a playbook, or we can give some guidance, or we can do some consultancy, but actually listening and hearing prominent disabled voices and what they're doing is a really important kind of part of that assimilation and learning and development in everyone's thinking around these subjects. And that goes for all minorities, not just the disabled community. You want to build people's comfort and confidence around inclusion, because then they're going to naturally make more inclusive decisions as a result. And on the podcast, we think about marketing, we get people on in that realm, but then we also bring people on that are kind of in related endeavors or brands that are doing great work, because again, it's just interesting to talk to people that are leading the way in some shape or form and hear how they've approached it and how they kind of have cut through when we've already talked about tonight, like we know that there are these inherent barriers, but like what is it that makes them go from going, oh, I could have not done this, but I'm doing it and I'm enjoying it and it's awesome and it's pushing things forward, and so what is it about those people that makes them tick? And I think that's really interesting as well, because we want more people like that can kind of share what makes them tick and hopefully empower others to go, like that's something that I want to do in my life too.
I love that, man. I love that. Keep it going. Just to wrap, my bro, what's the dumbest thing somebody's ever said to you regarding your disability? What's the thing that just makes you just...
So many dumb things. I mean, I get a lot that people wonder what happened to me, as in I wasn't born like this. They think that it was acquired, and I find that fascinating because they must think that like I was in Chernobyl or something, like some nuclear reactor, and I'm just and by that maybe that isn't even Chernobyl, so it's a bad example, but literally put in a microwave or something and turned into who I am, that's fine, like it doesn't bother me at all. Probably an interesting one, and again, this is cultural, it isn't a slight. When I went to Russia before, you couldn't go to Russia, kind of thing, like 2012 or 2013, something like that. Yeah. Pre, and I didn't once get given a menu in a restaurant, and we probably went. You had to eat out. You couldn't eat at the hotel or anything like. So we probably went to restaurants every night. And we were there for 10 days. I didn't once get given a restaurant, and they'd be perfectly pleasant and talk to me like waiters and stuff. And one particular guy, I said, "Oh, do you mind me asking, like, why is it that you're not giving me a menu?" And he was like, "Oh, because you can't read." And I was like, "Oh, really?" Like, he's like, "Oh, yeah, like in Russia, disabled people don't read." And again, I'm not trying to slight or slander anyone.
No,
because that might not be actually correct. I'm sure that there are incredibly well-educated disabled people in Russia, but it was his utter belief, like it was just so assured that is the way that things go for him, and it was my experience over those 10 days that I just was never given the menu, and it was just so fascinating. It was this incredible sliding doors moment of you realize, again, the life that you've had can be just so different in different places. And on the streets of Russia, I was constantly being given money, or people trying to give me money, because there weren't really
and
charities.
You took it, didn't you? You took it, didn't you, Dom? You took it.
Do you know what? I had to take it 3 times. I had to take it 3 times.
Oh, I had
people
to.
were so insistent.
Oh, yeah. Please stop forcing your money on me.
Yeah.
You're a liar. You're a liar. You welcomed it, Tom. I know you.
Yeah. I was like, oh, I've got this extra large pocket here. Yeah. But no, it was fascinating because just everywhere, like people were offering money, and it's because they didn't really have like charity in the same way we do here. So if someone is begging, like they need the money, and if someone's on the street they're disabled, they need the money because they're most likely not working. And again, those are all, I'm sure, like slanderous things to say, and there's plenty of examples where I'm sure that isn't the case, but that was, how it was explained to me in my experience when I was there. And it was fascinating. Like, it was absolutely like fascinating to just see that other approach to disability completely. And it was very, very unlike anything I'd seen anywhere else in the world.
Well, I just want to say, next time I go to Russia, I'll be wearing shorts. Let's put it.
I'll be honest, there weren't many black people either, buddy. Like, I wouldn't recommend it.
Oh well, somewhere else then. Dom, listen, you are super dope, man. You said that you were. What was your number? Your number was a 6, wasn't it? You said you thought you were a 6 out of 10.
My YouTube history. I haven't told you my YouTube search history yet.
Does that bring it up or down?
Oh, down. Yeah,
definitely down. Okay.
Down. You'll put me near -6.
I'm not having it, Dom. Listen, I've known you for a long time. I think you're super amazing. I think you're one of the most talented people that I know. I genuinely mean that. And
thank you.
Your fashion makes you definitely more than a 6. Your sense of humor, also. No, being real, and your heart, and just going back to you speaking about kind of dating and how you consider the other person whilst considering and protecting kind of yourself. I think says so much about how dope you are, because you have so much to offer. You don't need to hear this from me now because you are happily involved with your partner, and I know that's all good. So that doesn't need to be said, but all these things kind of just speak to how amazing you are.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a joy to speak to you. It's a joy to see you. We will do that very soon. But
for sure,
thank you so much for having me. And I really look forward to seeing how this podcast, explodes, because
it's going to explode because of people like you, man. As I mentioned, we will put in the description the link to the purple goats, the goat purple, the purple goat, the goat purple, the purple goats,
purple goat agency.
Purple goat agency. I'll keep that in as well because it's a bit embarrassing for me. But we will put it in the description below, I promise. And big up all the work you're doing. If you haven't subscribed, shared, whack in the WhatsApp group already, what are you waiting for? I'm going to give you 3 seconds right now to do that.
Ding.
That's your 3 seconds. So hopefully you've done that by now. We'll see you next time. Peace.